I am delighted to be here, delighted to have been asked to join with you on a regular basis, twice a month, and see where this all takes us. Last month, I talked a lot about who I am, what my story is, because you deserve to know that if we're going to be in this relationship together. This time, I'd like to talk about what I believe, and maybe a little bit about how that came to be, because it's been an amazing journey. I was born and raised Catholic. Everybody else in there, a few nods, there always are. Loved much about the church, the history, the sort of pageantry, the ritual. I just was never comfortable with the beliefs, which can be a problem. I was that kid in the classroom that was always saying, but what if, and the nuns were always saying, shut up, basically, in a spiritual way, of course. From there, I talked last time about my adventures through addiction and anxiety and depression and a lot of painful lessons along the way, and found myself in unity, in a unity church, hearing Eric Butterworth, and knowing that my life had changed. You have those moments when suddenly you are not the same person walking out that you were walking in. It took me a while to surrender to that. It takes me a while to surrender to anything, actually. But about 5 years later, by that time I was living in Chicago, and I was feeling fine. I wasn't in any dire need. I wasn't in any pain. I was comfortably in recovery by then. But things just didn't feel as fulfilling as I had thought they would feel. I was reaching goals and saying, well, why don't I feel like I've just reached a goal? You know, why do I feel that this goal is insufficient? And that brought me back to Unity in Chicago. Remarkable minister, Mike Batoin, and service on the board, service as a volunteer, service on the board, and classes at Unity Village. And people started saying, so when are you applying to ministerial school? I said, I'm not applying to ministerial school. I'm just along for the ride here. I'm just taking classes because I'm interested in them. And people sort of nodded and knew differently, especially at Unity Village. And Mike was very instrumental, Reverend Mike was very instrumental in sort of nudging me along, and it was a nudge all the way. All right, I'll send for the application, but I'm probably not going to fill it out. All right, I'll fill it out, but I'm not going to send it in. All right, I'll send it in, but I know they're going to say no. Okay, they said yes, that doesn't mean I have to go. Okay, I'll go down for the interview, but I'm each kicking and screaming each step of the way. And through 2 amazing years that I treasure deeply of living at Unity Village, studying in the ministerial program, interacting with my classmates, which in many ways was the whole purpose of the thing, I think. It was just by practicing the principles, by dealing with these people that were in your face every morning at 7 o'clock when you got up, to go to class. It was a wonderful, rich experience, and I think I may have somewhat graduated and been ordained with the thought that I'd now got a handle on truth. I had learned what Charles Fillmore said about it, I had read Eric Butterworth, I had taken classes, I had memorized things, I had passed tests, so I must be, pretty much spiritually done for this lifetime. That has not proved to be the case. And I think it's important to realize that it's an aspect of unity that we don't talk about all that much, but unity is always changing. Unity doesn't try to contain you within its boundaries, doesn't tell you what to believe. It supports you while you find what you believe. It supports support you while you go through changes and growth. And it can be alarming sometimes. I mean, with a Catholic background, you want to be just told, that you do this and you don't do that, and what's the question? That wasn't the case, and it took me a while to get a handle on that, because as a minister, you first think, I have to act as if I am totally in control of truth. I have got to be all things to all people. That worked. My first ministry was successful, but it didn't work for me. And I kept moving to Chicago, the church in Chicago for 7 years, the church in Dallas, then to Hartford. And then, in semi-retirement, not having a church to run on a daily basis, I had the time to look back and to look within and to say, who am I now? What do I believe now? What is my understanding now? Who am I? As I stand here, as I write, most of my ministry now is writing for Daily Word, for Unity Magazine. What is the understanding I'm writing from? It's really important that I know that. And that's been my work for the past couple of years. And this is really the first time I've had an opportunity to present it or suggest it in a sort of cohesive way. Well, I hope it'll be a cohesive way. We'll see as we move along. To begin with, of course, the basic question you always hear about unity, when people are first told that you are in unity, is unity Christian, right? And the question is, am I Christian? And in both cases, the answer is, depends on what you mean. It depends on who's asking the question. I am a committed follower of the ministry of Jesus Christ. I am not always, in fact, quite frequently not, comfortable with the structure we call Christianity that has been built on that pedestal, so to speak. So if by Christianity you mean the structure itself, the church, and the church is now, then no, I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself a Christian. Some people, that bothers some people. Some other people are bothered because my message is always quite oriented toward the teachings of Jesus Christ. I recognize, as Unity does, that there are many paths, infinite paths, to the same God, the same deity, the same spiritual awareness. And it's important that you recognize the value of all the paths. It's also important that you pick a path. You can't get anywhere if you just keep bumping along from path to path, appreciating a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here. Pick a path and work it, knowing that it isn't the only path. It's your path. That's what it is. It's your path. And you can go deeper into yourself by using the path that is comfortable for you. So yes, I have studied Buddhism. I've been to India. I've had the opportunity to meet with the Dalai Lama. I don't consider myself a Buddhist. I've been exposed to, I've experienced Judaism and other Hinduism, other religions, native religions. I have quite a fascination with native religions, especially with the stories that come out of native religions. But I consider myself a follower of Jesus Christ because I find in his message, in his patient, mostly patient, sometimes not, loving example, I find the guidance I need, the encouragement I need, and the humor I need to move through, because I think humor is a vastly underappreciated spiritual quality. You need to be able to laugh if you're going to make it through it all, right? So I realize that it takes a certain amount of chutzpah, there's my Jewish background, chutzpah, to stand before you some 2,000 years after Jesus walked the earth and suggest that he has been seriously misunderstood and or misused by the history of the Christian church. That realization is no longer as extreme as it once seemed. I'm very satisfied to discover that many mainstream Bible scholars are stepping up to a new perspective on the nature and the ministry of Jesus Christ. It is interesting that I find more resistance within unity than I do with my ministerial colleagues that I'm drawn to or that are drawn to me in my community or over the internet. There's just a growing awareness that we may have, it's not that we missed the point, it's that it's time to shift. There was a time when we needed to be told what to do. There's a time when we were not spiritually mature enough to understand and take responsibility for our own spiritual truth. But that time is passing, and it's time to step into a new dimension, a new understanding, a new awareness. It's time to truly, truly accept ourselves as the Christ. We spend a lot of time trying to accept Jesus as the Christ. That took a while, right? But I have to accept myself as fully the Christ. Not perfectly expressing, God knows, but fully the Christ. There is nothing about me that is not the Christ. There is not a cell in my body, not a thought in my mind that is not the Christ. And that's the great awareness that I've been working with recently. There's really nothing new about that. Nothing new about recognizing Jesus, not as the founder of a new religion, but as a mystic, with dramatic new understandings of the relationship between God and mankind. I read recently that the Christ came into human form as Jesus to correct misunderstandings that had accrued through the years about the story of Adam and Eve. Is that amazing? Is that interesting?
Yes.
We totally misunderstood. The point where we misunderstood had to do with her leaving the garden. We believed that as a result of Eve's choice to eat the apple, we were dealing with an angry God who would never, and was holding us responsible, even though I didn't eat the damn apple. But that version of the story was the underpinning of everything we came to believe later. That we were dealing with an angry God and we had to find some way to calm him down and make him happy and make him let us back into heaven, back into the garden. That is not the story as I've been teaching it for a number of years. I do workshops on Adam and Eve and the two creation stories. And there's nothing, if you go back and look at Genesis, there is nothing there that says God was angry and spoke angrily. He was factual. You've made a choice. Choices have consequences. The first lesson of a dualistic experience is choices have consequences. The truth is, if you work through all of the metaphysics of it, of course, the serpent is as much a creation of God as Adam and Eve are. He didn't come from somewhere else. The devil didn't send him in to screw things up. He was part of God's plan, which suggests that God's plan all along was that we become creative, that we continue the process of creation that began in divine mind, and that needs a willingness to move forward, a willingness to express. But you can't create without making choices, and you can't make choices without duality. So you can't sit in the allness of truth and create the kingdom. And for whatever reason, the entire movement, the entire flow of the divine is to create itself, to make itself manifest. And we are the channels, we are some of the channels through which that is to be done. So what he was saying to Adam and Eve and Adam, is you've made a rough choice. It's exactly the choice I hoped you'd make. I didn't intend for you to sit in the garden and do nothing for all eternity. I wanted you to go out, but you had to decide for yourself. I couldn't send you out. You had to make that choice. You had to make that choice to step into what that tree was called, the knowledge of good and evil. You need to be willing to experience duality. There was no good and evil in the garden. There was only divine. You have to step out and experience duality if you're going to do your creative work. But we are never apart from that energy of divine mind. So if Christ came into human form as Jesus to correct our misunderstanding, then to carry that suggestion forward, Jesus came to correct the misunderstandings of Adam and Eve. It's our job today to correct the misunderstandings about Jesus. Because we've done the same thing, haven't we?
Oh, okay.
We've moved ourselves forward, building on that story, but misunderstanding the story. The Jesus that I understand and that I find in the scriptures was not interested in creating a church.
No.
He wasn't interested in being another religious movement on the planet. There are enough.
That's right.
He was interested in empowering each of us individually. He was interested in teaching us the mystical dimension to ourselves, that allows us to truly, consciously, instead of accidentally, consciously create the kingdom. I mean, choices have consequences, and whatever choices we make have consequences, whether we realize it or not, whether we intend it or not. But the more we realize it, and the more we intend it, the more we can move forward to creating the kingdom. The more we can realize the power we have to transform this world, to transform our life experience here. This is a quote, and actually it ties very much into today's daily word, I think. This is a quote from Franciscan priest whose writings I follow daily. Really, he's just remarkable. His name is Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R. The genius of Jesus' ministry is his revelation that God uses tragedy, suffering, pain, betrayal, and death itself, not to wound you, but in fact to bring you to yourself. There are no dead ends. There are no dead ends. There are no paths in which you are removed from the divine. There are certainly times in my life when I felt removed from the divine. And even in New Thought, it can be delicate, it can be difficult. You know, there used to be a joke about at Unity Village, the people who worked there, who may or may not have been in Unity themselves, would stay home if they had even the slightest cold. Not because they didn't feel well enough to go to work, but because they couldn't put up with people all day going, "Oh, how'd you bring that on yourself?" You know, "Oh, look what's happening in your mind." So we can misuse any sort of understanding. Even this understanding, there is nothing shameful or bad about being sick. There's nothing, I've ministered to cancer patients, for example, who feel shame about having cancer. You know, it must mean I've done something wrong. It must mean I'm not a good person because here I have this disease. It means that on some soul level you agreed to use that experience as a part of your mystical path. That's what it means. And to look back and see the events of my life not as mistakes I made and side roads I wandered down, wildernesses I found myself stranded in, but to see every step of it as a part of my commitment to create the kingdom. My commitment to become the mystic I am, so that I can add my contribution to creating the kingdom, which is our job, the job for all of us. It's why we're here. Why else would we be here? That's a profound question once you let go of that old Adam and Eve story, isn't it? Because if we're not here to suffer, if God isn't here because he wants to see us suffer, we're not here to earn our way someplace else. We're not here because we've been rejected by the divine. We're here to be the divine. But why? Why are we here? Well, there has to be a reason. And for me, that reason is we're in this dualistic experience, in these bodies in this life so that we can, through that, moving through that dualism, moving through the illusions, moving through the fears, that we can bring the love and be the love and carry us forward to a new dimension of understanding, just as Jesus carried or tried to carry people forward at that time. To the idea that it's really, there's no indication that Jesus told people they should go to church more often, or give more at church, or that they should. He wasn't interested in that. He was interested in who you are and what's your problem and what is blocking you from realizing the truth of who you are. And how can I help you dissolve that block? Sometimes it's a healing, sometimes it's a lesson, sometimes it's simply love. We can't even imagine what it would have been like to sit in the presence of the Christ fully expressing, because that's what Jesus was. The Christ fully expressing nothing but love on his good days. Because Jesus was not totally the Christ, always loving all the time. He gets angry at the Pharisees. He gets angry at his own disciples for not understanding what he's saying. He gets frustrated, I'm trying to get this across to you. I don't have a lot of time. You're not even taking notes. What is going on here? Please, focus, people, focus. So there's that human quality to him too, but he was always able to return to the Christ, to return to being the Christ. And so are we able, once we truly believe we are. Because the question is still the same, isn't it? What is blocking you from believing in yourself as the Christ? What is the yes but that your ego mind is saying? You're a spiritual being. Yes, but you're still lazy and you still get angry at things. That's part of it. I'm here to be lazy. I'm here to get angry at things, so that by doing that, by recognizing it, by embracing it and moving on, by surrendering to it and moving on, I can continue the process of creation. It's very difficult sometimes to counsel somebody with cancer, for example, that you really need to surrender to your disease, but you do. You need to love that disease, not to create more duality by seeing it as an enemy that has to be plucked out, but just to embrace, okay, it's not an experience I consciously would have chosen, but on some level I obviously did. So it must be that this is part of my spiritual path. This is part of my spiritual work to do while I'm here. Now, you don't construct a church around that revelation. It's too simple, it's too immediate, it's too personal. It rather places Jesus in the tradition of the great prophets, for whom God was not a distant idea, but a personal, immediate experience. The prophets did not tell people that they should go to the temple. The prophets told people they should remember who they were. They should remember their covenant with the divine, because they were forgetting it, they were buying into the illusion of the duality, and they were forgetting the spiritual truth. And that's sort of ongoingly the message, isn't it? The mystical path is centered in both knowledge and mystery, encompassing the totality of the divine. We can't say, I want to understand all that the divine is. You have to love that sense of mystery. You have to love, that's part of what the Catholic Church did for me, actually. One of my friends, himself a mystic and teacher of great power, Andrew Harvey, likes to say that the Christ is as much a child of the mother as of the father. And that's the mystical element. The mystical element is the mother, not in any sort of pejorative or sexual terms, not weaker and stronger, just love and intellect, let's call it. Love and intellect. Both essential. We need to understand, but we also have to embrace the unknown, embrace the mystery, and extend the love without defining where it goes or what it should accomplish or who deserves it. Simply to be the love. So for several years I've been working on a realization that mystical Christianity is in fact a separate spiritual path that can trace its roots at least as far back as the church can trace its. The distinction, I think, lies in the mystical distinction between Jesus and the Christ. So many people think Christ was his last name. Jesus Christ. Well, if that were even true, then it would be true that Christ is your last name also. We're all of that family. We're all the Christ. We're all Christs. And the family reunion would be quite a mess, wouldn't it? And for me, a key moment is described in a fragment of ancient papyrus found at the end of the 19th century, called the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, or known as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. We just have a fragment of it. And it describes the last gathering of Jesus and the disciples in the upper room. Mary, Peter, Thomas, all of them are there. And Jesus appears briefly and basically says, good luck to all of you, I'm out of here, I can only imagine how difficult it was, having resurrected to pure Christ, to continue to present yourself in that limited human body. Must have been a real challenge and a tremendous expression of love. Tremendous expression of love. So, in his absence, the minute they leave, Peter turns to Mary and says, you were closer to him than any of us. You understood him more than any of us did. Tell us what he was saying. He's telling us we should go out and carry the word. What word? What is the word? And what that word is what we will talk about next time I'm here, which is the vision of the great tree. One of the most amazing spiritual tools I've ever come across. The only time I've ever found Jesus saying specifically, this is what I believe, this is what is true, this is what I'm basing all of this ministry on. Not just event after event, challenge after challenge, healing after healing, but there is an understanding, a central understanding that holds it all together that you really need to share. Well, immediately Peter says, he never told us that. That sounds ridiculous. Why would he tell that to a woman instead of to us? And the schism happens right there on the spot. Peter and James, the brother of Jesus, and those who wanted to structure a religious organization around the story of Jesus that would fit in comfortably with the synagogues. They went over here and started to do that. And we have seen that line progress through centuries and centuries. Mary, Thomas, other disciples, simply went a different way. They didn't try to change this. They didn't try to argue them out of it. They simply said, well, our understanding of the message is very different, and we're going to go this way with it. And because their message was about the personal power of every person, they never achieved the visibility that the church ultimately achieved. It's often been thought that the mystics were sort of part of the church but rebellious against the church. They were an undercurrent. And they were often put to death because they didn't agree with the church. Now it's possible, I think, to see that they were always a separate flow, a separate understanding of the teachings of Jesus Christ. And I believe with all my heart that path, that mystical path, led directly to and through the Fillmores.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Charles Fillmore, American Mystic, is the title of his biography. And he was. And he was. I think unity since then has focused on trying not to be offensive to this larger church energy over here. We structure our Sundays on their model. We try to be as much like them as we can while hanging on to our differences, our different understandings. But it's time, I think, for us to realize we are not them. We are part of this path. We don't trace back to Peter, we trace back to Mary Magdalene. I don't want to go on here. You get me started on this and I'll go crazy. What we're going to be looking at is a document that has come into my hands recently. It's only been translated into English for less than 10 years. It's called The Gospel of the Beloved Companion. It comes from Languedoc, the part of southeastern France that has always been sort of separate, had its own language, its own culture. Tradition has long held that Mary Magdalene went there. That was where she went after, to conclude her life experience and to continue her ministry. Andrew Harvey takes groups of people there to move from place to place, the churches that are dedicated to Mary Magdalene. They have had this document in their language, in Languedoc, translated from the Greek into Languedoc. They have had it since the 12th century. They have clung to it, they have held it, they have kept it secret. They've not allowed it to be translated. It was the truth that it was theirs to work with, and it was theirs alone. One of them has stepped forward to translate it into English. Hasn't caused a lot of a stir, except in my heart. It is astonishing. It is an astonishing document. It is not unlike the other Gospels. In fact, it is really a retelling of the Gospel of John, or vice versa, I think. John is a retelling of the Gospel of the Beloved Companion. But it helps us see deeper. It helps us understand. It talks more about the feelings that were going on while all of this were happening. How did we feel about it? How did it feel to us as we were moving through? It's a wonderful document. I am thrilled to be able to share it. I hope you will be patient with me while I do. I hope that is something that interests you. We'll start talking next time about the vision of the great tree, which is the structure that Mary Magdalene uses to define the message and the ministry of Jesus Christ in a way that I have never come across in all my years. So beyond words, I am grateful for this opportunity to be here, to work with you. Through these talks, we'll have a discussion group, if there's anybody interested afterward, to follow up on any of this, anything you hear that interests you or that annoys you. We want to hear about that. And we will keep moving forward to see just what this other path is about. Is it something that we want to claim? Is it something that does it help us understand our own hearts a little better, which is what it has done for me. It has helped me understand my heart. I am so grateful to be here. Many, many blessings.